The silence in Choi Eun-hee's hanok wasn't just the absence of noise, it was a presence, thick and heavy like the humid late spring air settling over Seoul. At 78, her world had shrunk to these traditional wooden walls, the small, meticulously swept courtyard her only vista. She sat by the low table, hands cupped around a cooling mug of barley tea. Her fingers, still nimble from decades spent guiding needles through fabric in her now closed tailor shop, trembled almost imperceptibly. Outside, the ancient flagstones of the courtyard lay uneven, a mosaic of potential betrayal she increasingly avoided looking at directly. A faint, sharp scent of medicinal patches clung to the air around her, a constant reminder of aches both real and anticipated. Her grandson, Kang Min-jun, arrived like a gust of bright modern air into the quiet stillness. 20 years old, all lean energy and the quiet hum of the smartphone perpetually in his pocket, he shed his sneakers at the threshold, his voice warm. "Halmeoni, I'm here." Yoon-hee forced a smile, straightening her slightly stooped shoulders, a constant conscious effort against the pull of age. "I go. Min-jun-ah. Come in, sit." He settled onto the floor cushion opposite her, his observant eyes taking in the untouched plate of yakgwa honey cookies. The way her gaze skittered away from the courtyard door. "It's beautiful outside today, Halmeoni. Not too hot. We could take a short walk, maybe down to the stream." She waved a dismissive hand, the gesture tighter than usual. "Ah, the pollen count is high," they said on the television. Better to stay inside. It was a flimsy excuse, and they both knew it. Ever since that stumble a month ago, not even a proper fall, just a jarring loss of balance on the curb outside the market that had sent a shockwave of fear through her, the world outside had felt mined with hazards. Her independence, fiercely guarded for 15 years since her husband's passing, felt fragile, easily shattered. The image of her friend, Mrs. Kim, bedridden after a hip fracture, was a recurring phantom in her thoughts. Min-jun didn't push. He just nodded, his gaze thoughtful. He talked about his university classes, the baffling intricacies of computer code, the latest campus gossip. But Yoon-hee could feel his concern, a gentle pressure beneath the surface of his chatter. He saw the withdrawal, the fear masquerading as prudence. He saw the world shrinking around his proud, resilient grandmother, and it worried him more than any complex algorithm. Later that week, hunched over his laptop, ostensibly working on a health informatics assignment, Min-jun typed different search terms. Safe exercise for seniors, balance exercises, elderly career, joint pain, 70s avoid. Article after article, video after video painted a clear picture. The jogging and brisk hiking his grandmother once enjoyed were now potential hazards. High-impact activities stressed aging joints. Sudden bursts of intensity strained the cardiovascular system. But inactivity was its own danger, a slow slide into weakness and isolation. He found lists mirroring the concerns he felt: avoid squats, lunges, jumping. Instead, recommendations surfaced again and again: walking on flat surfaces, swimming, gentle strengthening, tai chi for balance. An idea began to form, a careful strategy respectful of the pride that was both her strength and her shield. His next visit, he came armed not with suggestions for walks, but with a canvas bag. From it, he pulled out several brightly coloured elastic bands. "Look, Halmeoni, my friend's mother uses these. Physiotherapist recommended them." Yoon-hee eyed the bands with suspicion. "Silly rubber things. What good are those?" "They're for strength," Min-jun said, keeping his tone light, casual. He sat beside her, looping a yellow, low-resistance band around his hands. "Like this. Just gentle pulling. Good for the arm muscles, they say. Helps with lifting things." He focused deliberately on her arms, avoiding any mention of legs or balance, the areas most fraught with her fear. She watched, her lips pursed, pride warred with a flicker of curiosity, and perhaps a deeper yearning to feel capable again. "Let me see that." He handed her the yellow band. Tentatively, she mimicked his movement, pulling her hands apart. A small, satisfying tension met her effort. It wasn't strenuous, didn't jar anything. "See? Easy," Min-jun encouraged, hiding his relief. He showed her another simple move, a bicep curl motion while seated. They sat there for 10 minutes, Min-jun patiently demonstrating, Yoon-hee slowly, cautiously following. A tiny spark of her old determination flickered in her eyes. When he left, the yellow band remained on her low table, not hidden away. Later that evening, when the house was quiet, she picked it up again, feeling the gentle resistance, a small, private act of defiance against the encroaching limitations. The resistance bands became a quiet ritual during Minjun's visits. He gradually introduced exercises for her legs, always seated, always gentle. He never pushed, celebrating the small victories, holding a stretch a second longer, completing an extra repetition. Buoyed by this small success, he revisited the idea of walking. "Halmione, just to the entrance of the park. The path there is very smooth, completely flat. I'll walk right beside you." He emphasized safety, support. She hesitated, the memory of the curb incident sharp. But the small gains with the bands had planted a tiny seed of hope, and the four walls of the hanok felt tighter than ever. "Only to the entrance," she conceded, her voice thin. Their first walk was a study in hyper-caution. Yoonhee's hand gripped Minjun's arm like a vice, her eyes fixed on the pavement directly ahead, scanning for imperfections. Every crack, every slight incline seemed magnified. Minjun walked slowly, matching her pace, offering a steady stream of observations about the blooming azaleas lining the path, the playful shouts of children from a nearby playground, anything to distract from the terrain beneath her feet. They only made it halfway to the park entrance before she declared herself tired. But it was a start. Over the following weeks, the walks gradually lengthened. They reached the park entrance, then ventured onto the wide, paved loop within. Yoonhee's grip on Minjun's arm loosened slightly. She began to lift her gaze, noticing the changing greens of the trees, the scent of pine needles after a brief shower, the elderly men gathered around a baddock board, their quiet concentration familiar and comforting. She started exchanging tentative nods with other seniors on their slow circuits. Consistency, Minjun had said. It wasn't about distance or speed, but the simple act of moving, regularly, safely. Minjun, meanwhile, continued his research. He discovered the local Gaho Dong Community Center, bright and modern, offered a Tai Chi class specifically designed for seniors. He watched videos online, the slow-flowing movements, the emphasis on balance and coordination. It seemed perfect. "Halmione," he began carefully one afternoon, pouring her fresh tea. "I heard about a class at the community center. Tai Chi. They say it's very good for balance, very gentle on the knees." Yoonhee stiffened immediately. "Tai Chi? A class? I go, Minjuna. That's not for me." Images flooded her mind, herself clumsy and awkward among strangers, the potential embarrassment of losing her balance in front of others. "I don't like group things, and those movements, they look strange. Besides, my walking is getting better." Her voice held a note of finality, shutting the door on the suggestion. Minjun saw the familiar walls of pride and fear go up, thicker this time. He didn't press, letting the idea hang in the air, hoping the seed might take root later. The turning point came unexpectedly, brutally reinforcing Yoonhee's deepest fears. They were walking back from the park on a familiar stretch of pavement near her home, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows. Yoonhee, perhaps lulled into a moment of overconfidence by their recent progress, momentarily loosened her vigilance. Her foot caught the edge of a slightly raised paving stone. It wasn't a fall, not quite. But her body pitched forward, her arms flailing, a gasp tearing from her throat. Minjun reacted instantly, his strong grip catching her before she went down, steadying her trembling frame. The physical impact was minimal, but the psychological shock was profound. The world tilted, the ground beneath her feet suddenly treacherous again. The carefully rebuilt confidence shattered, replaced by a cold, paralyzing terror. Tears welled in her eyes, tears of fear and frustration and the bitter humiliation of her body's betrayal. Minjun held her, his own heart pounding. He didn't offer platitudes. He just stood there, a solid presence, until her trembling subsided slightly. He walked her the remaining few steps home in silence, the weight of her fear palpable between them. Inside the hanok, Yoonhee sank onto her cushion, drawing into herself. The medicinal patch scent seemed stronger, mocking her brief illusion of progress. Minjun made tea, the familiar ritual a small anchor in the sudden storm. He didn't speak of the incident, didn't push, didn't offer solutions. He just sat with her, his quiet presence a testament to his unwavering support. But Yoonhee knew. In the terrifying clarity of that near fall, she understood. Walking with Minjun was a crutch, not a cure. The fear wasn't just about falling, it was about the loss of control, the shrinking horizon. The resistance bands helped, the walks helped, but they weren't addressing the core issue, her precarious balance, the thief waiting to steal her independence. The image of the Tai Chi class, previously dismissed, flickered in her mind. The slow, deliberate movements, the focus Park So-yun, the instructor, seemed to embody. Was it possible? Could something so unfamiliar hold an answer? The thought was terrifying, but the alternative, a life ruled by fear, confined to these walls, was suddenly unbearable. A few days later, Minjun found a moment. He wasn't looking at her, but scrolling through his phone, seemingly casual. "Halmione, look at this video," he murmured, angling the screen towards her. It showed a group of seniors, silver-haired like her, moving through Tai Chi forms in a sunlit room. Their movements were slow, graceful, focused. There was a quiet dignity about them, a sense of centered calm. He didn't mention the class directly, just let her watch. Yoon-hee observed in silence, her expression unreadable. The figures on the small screen moved with a fluidity she envied, a stability she craved. The instructor, a woman in her mid-40s perhaps, moved among them, offering quiet adjustments. It didn't look strange anymore. It looked possible. Difficult, yes. Unfamiliar, certainly. But possible. She took a deep breath, the scent of old wood and dried herbs filling her lungs. "That community center," she said, her voice barely a whisper, avoiding his eyes. "The Tai Chi class. When is it?" Minjun looked up, careful to keep the surge of hope from his voice. "Tuesdays and Thursdays. 10 in the morning." He paused. "We could just go and watch? No pressure to join. Just see what it's like." She hesitated for a long moment, the internal battle raging. Fear versus the fierce, flickering ember of her will to remain independent. Finally, she gave a single curt nod. "We can watch." The community center buzzed with a gentle energy quite different from the solemn quiet of Yoon-hee's Hanok. Bright posters advertised calligraphy classes, singing groups, computer lessons for seniors. The air smelled faintly of floor wax and coffee. Yoon-hee clutched Minjun's arm, her knuckles white, as they navigated the corridor towards the multi-purpose room where the Tai Chi class was held. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. What was she doing here? This was foolishness. They stopped at the open doorway. Inside, about 15 seniors were arranged in loose rows on the polished floor. Soft instrumental music played. At the front stood Park So-yun, the instructor Minjun had mentioned. She was demonstrating a movement, her body flowing with a controlled grace that seemed effortless. Her voice was calm, encouraging. "Slowly, breathe in, shift your weight, feel the connection to the floor." The participants mirrored her, some fluidly, others with more concentration, their ages and abilities varying. There was no sense of competition, only shared focus. Yoon-hee watched, mesmerized despite her anxiety. It was slower than she'd imagined, more deliberate. Less about physical prowess, more about rootedness. A woman near the back, noticing them hovering at the door, offered a small, encouraging smile and a slight nod towards an empty space. The simple gesture momentarily disarmed Yoon-hee. It wasn't judgment she saw, but welcome. She looked at Minjun. He met her gaze, his expression full of quiet support, leaving the decision entirely hers. This was her threshold to cross. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach. But beside it, something else stirred. The stubborn refusal to surrender. The desire to reclaim a piece of the life fear had stolen. Taking a shaky breath that seemed to draw strength from the very air of the room, Choi Eun-hee let go of her grandson's arm. She straightened her shoulders, the familiar conscious effort. Then, placing one foot deliberately in front of the other, she stepped across the threshold and into the room. She found a spot near the back, feeling awkward and exposed. Minjun gave her a subtle, proud nod from the doorway before quietly slipping away. Yoon-hee turned her attention to Park So-yun, trying to untangle the slow, complex dance of arms and legs. Her first movements were stiff, hesitant, a beat behind everyone else. But she was there. She had joined. And in that moment, the victory wasn't in the perfection of the form, but in the courage of the first step. Weeks turned into a month, then 2. Late spring ripened into the full heat of Seoul's summer, the cicadas buzzing relentlessly outside. Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10 found Yoon-hee a regular, if still quiet, presence in Park So-yun's Tai Chi class. The initial awkwardness hadn't vanished entirely, but it had softened, replaced by a growing familiarity with the flowing sequences, parting the wild horse's mane, White crane spreads wings, grasp the sparrow's tail. She discovered nuances the introductory videos hadn't shown. One afternoon, a specific wrist-turning movement in single whip sent an unexpected sharp twinge up her forearm, a ghost pain from an old sprain she'd almost forgotten. Her first instinct was to stop, retreat, the familiar whisper of fear returning. See? Even this isn't safe. But Park So-yeon, with her observant eyes, noticed the slight falter, the subtle wince. After class, she approached Yeon-hee quietly. "Mrs. Choi, is your wrist bothering you with that movement?" Caught off guard by the direct but gentle question, Yoon-hee hesitated, then admitted the old injury. Instead of generic advice, So-yeon showed her a slight modification, a way to turn from the elbow rather than the wrist, achieving the same energy flow without stressing the joint. "Listen to your body, Mrs. Choi," she'd said kindly. "Tai Chi adapts to you, not the other way around." That small interaction, that personalized care, dissolved another layer of Yoon-hee's resistance. It wasn't about forcing herself into a mold, it was about finding her way to move safely. The changes weren't dramatic, but they were real, woven into the fabric of her days. She began walking in the park alone sometimes, still cautious on the uneven sections, but the paralyzing fear had receded, replaced by mindful awareness. She carried herself differently, her posture less consciously forced, more naturally aligned. She even started tending the small patch of earth in her courtyard again, pulling weeds from around the determinedly blooming balsam flowers, the scent of damp soil mingling with the ever-present medicinal patches. One humid July afternoon, Min-jun arrived to find his grandmother not waiting passively by the tea table, but standing in the center of her small living area,